King's blood isn't a family trait. It's a curse. Because once you stop thinking of king's blood as genetics and start thinking of it as something much worse, Game of Thrones suddenly snaps into a whole new shape. Not a story about houses fighting houses, but about the same soul being recycled again and again, shoved into different bodies, handed the same impossible burden, and doomed to repeat the same mistakes until the world finally breaks or forgets. This theory sounds wild at first, I know. Reincarnation? In Game of Thrones? The gritty political fantasy where magic is supposed to be rare and expensive and emotionally inconvenient? But stay with me, because the show quietly builds this idea for 8 seasons, then buries it under swords, speeches, and extremely dramatic staring contests. The key is king's blood. That phrase comes up a lot. Way too much, actually, for something that's never fully explained. It has power. It fuels magic. It wakes dragons. It strengthens spells. And it always seems to belong to people who are drawn toward leadership, destruction, sacrifice, or some combination of all three. And here's the suspicious part. It doesn't matter which house they're from. Stark, Targaryen, Baratheon, even random claimants who barely know who they are. If they have king's blood, the universe leans toward them. Fate bends, people follow, and eventually things go very, very wrong. That's not lineage, that's recurrence. Let's zoom out. Across Westerosi history, the same story keeps replaying. A figure rises who seems destined to rule. They unite people. They promise order, justice, or peace. They gain power fast, too fast. And then the cost arrives. Madness, tyranny, betrayal, death, collapse, rinse and repeat. Different names, same shape. The theory goes like this. There is one archetypal king soul moving through time. Call it a hero, a conqueror, a breaker, a curse, whatever you like. It gets reborn into different bloodlines depending on the era. And every time it shows up, the world bends around it. Because it always has. What people are sensing when they talk about king's blood. Not DNA, destiny residue. Now let's talk characters, because this is where it gets uncomfortable in a fun way. Start with Daenerys Targaryen. She's the most obvious example, which is why people stop there. She has king's blood. Dragons respond to her. Fire doesn't kill her. People follow her without fully understanding why. She walks into cities, and history just rearranges itself. But what really gives it away is her internal conflict. Daenerys isn't just deciding whether to be good or evil. She's fighting the weight of expectation she didn't consciously choose. She keeps saying things like, "I was born to rule," and "This is my destiny," even when it costs her everything. That doesn't feel like ambition. It feels like a memory trying to surface. The Mad King wasn't crazy because he was evil. He was crazy because the burden finally crushed him. Same soul, later cycle, less control, now switch houses. Robert Baratheon. Robert has king's blood too, even though he wins the throne through rebellion instead of inheritance. He's charismatic, people love him. Armies rally behind him effortlessly. He becomes king, and then immediately rots from the inside. He hates ruling, he drinks, he avoids responsibility. He slowly destroys himself. Different personality, same curse. Robert didn't want the role, but the role wanted him. And once the soul takes the throne, it always pays the price. Then there's Jon Snow. And this is where the theory stops being cute and starts being kind of terrifying. Jon has king's blood through multiple lines. Targaryen. Stark. Old magic. New magic. He's basically destiny in a trench coat. But unlike Daenerys or Robert, Jon resists it harder than anyone. He doesn't want to rule. He doesn't want power. He actively rejects the throne even when it's handed to him wrapped in legitimacy and applause. But notice what happens instead. The universe won't let him rest. He's made Lord Commander. Then the king in the north. Then the rightful heir. Then the executioner of the queen. Then exiled to the edge of the world. Jon never escapes the role. He just gets punished for resisting it. That's what happens when the kingly soul refuses the crown. The system still demands balance. And if you're wondering why Melisandre is so obsessed with king's blood, this theory explains it cleanly. She doesn't care whose blood it is. She cares what it is. To her, king's blood is fuel, because it's already been shaped by destiny across lifetimes. It carries weight, momentum, magical inertia. That's why burning Gendry's blood matters. Gendry hasn't ruled anything. He barely knows who he is. But the blood still works, because the soul has passed through that line before. The spell isn't about the person. It's about the echo. Which brings us to the Stark side of things. People don't usually associate the Starks with kings in the mystical sense, but they absolutely should. The kings in the North ruled for thousands of years, and every Stark who rises too high shares the same problem. Honor becomes self-destruction. Ned Stark has king energy without the title. People trust him instinctively. He believes in duty above survival, and it gets him killed. Robb inherits the same traits. He's crowned. He inspires loyalty. He breaks one rule, one emotional deviation, and the entire structure collapses violently. Same soul, different lesson, same ending. Sansa is interesting here, because she almost breaks the pattern. She learns, she adapts, she takes the crown of the North, but strips it of destiny. She rules pragmatically, not mythically. She's not guided by prophecy, she's guided by trauma and observation. She has the blood, but not the curse. Arya goes even further. Arya refuses the soul entirely. She doesn't want to rule, she doesn't want a legacy, she doesn't want to repeat anyone's story, and that's why she leaves. That's not wanderlust, that's escape. Which brings us to the ending, because this theory completely reframes it. If king's blood is a recurring soul, then the end of Game of Thrones isn't about crowning the best ruler. It's about interrupting the cycle without destroying the world. Daenerys represents the soul in its most extreme form. Fire, certainty, destiny without restraint. Jon represents the soul trying to stop itself. And Bran? Bran is the lock. Bran doesn't have king's blood in the traditional sense, but he holds every memory of every cycle. He's the observer who stands outside the soul's reincarnation. Making him king isn't about power, it's about containment. A ruler who won't reproduce the curse. A king who ends the line without erasing history. The soul doesn't vanish, it goes dormant. Jon is sent north, where kings once ruled but no longer matter. The throne is destroyed, removing the symbolic magnet that keeps pulling the soul back into the same role. The world stabilizes, not because the curse is gone, but because it's been paused. That's why the ending feels quiet instead of triumphant. You're not watching victory, you're watching damage control. So when people say the ending felt wrong, that Bran didn't earn it, that Jon was robbed, that Daenerys was rushed, they're reacting emotionally to a story that wasn't about fairness. It was about pattern recognition. The show wasn't asking who deserves the throne. It was asking, how many times can the same soul burn the world before someone finally steps aside? And here's the final, slightly unsettling thought. If king's blood is a curse passed from body to body, then the most heroic act in Game of Thrones isn't conquering, ruling, or sacrificing yourself for a crown. It's refusing to inherit the soul at all. Walking away, breaking the echo, choosing a story that doesn't need a throne. So the next time you rewatch the show, stop tracking family trees and start tracking behaviors. Watch how the same traits reappear, how the same mistakes repeat, how destiny doesn't care about names. Because once you see king's blood as a reincarnating burden instead of a royal perk, Game of Thrones stops being a story about who ruled, and it starts being a story about who finally didn't. And if that idea just quietly shifted how you see half the characters in this show, maybe keep that thought rolling around. Because this theory doesn't exist alone, and the deeper you dig, the more it starts to feel like Westeros has been telling the same story for a very long time, whether its heroes want to or not.